Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Inside Property Development, where I'm talking to my old mate Dave Hughes from Hughes Architects. Hello, mate.
Hiya.
So I see you're still trying to look like me.
I've got my architect outfit on today.
You have.
Just like a proper architect.
So how's it going being an architect at the moment?
It's all right. I mean, most of our work's affordable housing. So I think when the new government came in, we were all excited about that because obviously Angela Rayner's committed to the 300,000 a year. I think then it all got a bit doom and gloom when they first started talking, and so the market's we're in a weird one. The market at the moment is a little bit on hold. Everyone sort of seems to be just waiting. I think we're all waiting for the budget, to be honest. So even though they've reintroduced housing targets, which is good because that really stopped the market when the Conservatives stopped the housing targets. That's really good, but I think everyone's just waiting for the budget, waiting for a bit of confidence. So it's just one of those weird, everyone's just sort of waiting for things. And it's not just us, everyone we talk to is pretty much in the same boat in the affordable housing sector. So,
yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. We'll come back to that. But before we start properly, tell us, how did you get started? How did you get into architecture? How did things lead up to you doing what you're doing now?
So I'm a working class boy, which I'm very proud of. And I left school with 3 O-levels, or GCSEs as they call them. I was talking to someone about this the other day who's younger than us, and they didn't know what O-levels were. So 3 GCSEs. And I was very good at technical drawing. So I got my neighbour worked at a multi-disc practice. This is in 88, so I was 17. And I got a job as a draftsman on the drawing boards. This is pre-computer days, just because I was good at drawing, in an architect's. And then...
Which architects?
So this,
a little one or a big one?
The big, so they were called PPI, and they're in Tunbridge Wells.
Okay.
So I passed my driving test about a week before I was due to start and bought a Mini, and then I'd commute every day to Tunbridge Wells. And it was a multi-disc, so it was architects, mechanical, electrical engineers, and structural engineers. And started on the board, and then started doing day release college and did BTEC. And I then was a qualified technician. So I did 5 years of day release. And by then I'd moved to another practice, and then the recession came in the early 90s. And so I was a carpenter for about a year, doing labouring and carpentry whilst I was finishing my day release. And then back then you got more for your grant than you did on the dole. This is pre-student loans. And because I had worked, I was classed as a mature student. So I could then get a grant and go to university. So that's how I went to university. So I was the first person in my family to go to university, never expected to. And as a technician, I thought that was, this is where I was going to be, just on the boards, drawing. It was great. I really enjoyed it. I went to Greenwich University and then got a job in Milton Keynes for a year, and then went to University College London, the Bartlett, which is the greatest architecture school in the world.
Yeah.
And then really never looked back. And then worked for different practices, and then we met when I was a director at a Sale Architecture, a big residential commercial practice. Set up on my own in 2007. We set up with a couple of guys in 2007. Did well for a year, and then it all went to shit, and then carried on for a couple of years. That company went under. I was then freelance consultant for a while. I'm an accredited RIBA client design advisor, so I was doing some consultancy. And then I met Penny, who's my business partner now, and Matt, who's my other, 3 of us own the company, and we set up Hughes about 7 years ago. And there's 17 of us, and we're in London Bridge, and we, as I say, do 95% affordable housing. So that's how I got here.
Very good. So that's interesting. I must admit, we probably spoke about that before, and I've probably forgotten, but I was also a mature student as well, actually. And not that I was very mature, really, but anyway. But so one of the reasons I like you is because you are like a proper, what I call a developer's architect. Yeah. So, there are a lot of architects, in my opinion, that are, just really not very good. Yeah. It's amazing, really. I think there are a lot of people think that oh, you're an architect, that they're all the same. Certainly the general public, and perhaps from some smaller or inexperienced developers might think that because someone's an architect, then that automatically means they're going to be good. But a lot of them are really rubbish. And even some of the good ones, they don't really get it in terms of, from a developer's point of view. Because at the end of the day, we've got to make deals stack up. Stuff's got to be buildable. It's not all about being, curved glass and expensive stuff that you can never afford to build. So, it's a fine balance, isn't it? We're creating stuff that's good, that's actually buildable as well,
Yeah. I mean, years and years ago, there was a president of the RPA called George Ferguson, and he used to have a saying that we want to do the good ordinary. And he said, look, there's, 26,000 qualified architects in the UK. 500 of those are your superstars. But if the rest of us can just do the ordinary work well, then we're going to do better. Let's stop all trying to be the star architects. And it always really stuck with me. And I think one of the things from my background was because I never expected to be an architect, I've not gone into it with any preconceived ideas about what architecture is, or I never grew up with that idea. And when we set up my practice, or when Penny and I set up the practice, Penny's not an architect; she's not qualified at all.
I didn't realise
and that's
that.
really, really good for us because it brings a sort of commercial bent, but also a sort of person who doesn't have some of those architectural hang-ups. And Matt, who's our technical director, is a very technical guy. And when we set up, we said a few things. One was we will only draw what we can build. So we're very strict about buildability in our business. And we said that we're not going to be Ponces. So we have an Archi-speak box. We don't have a swear box in the office because we all swear so much. But we have an Archi-speak box. So if people say, materiality, they have to put money in the box.
I love it.
And so I've done a couple of talks now about Archi-speak. And this is a truth. I did a planning committee at Hounslow Council. And the guy in front of us, and this is genuine, and people think I made this up and I haven't. An architect said, they were presenting the scheme, and he said, we looked at the local vernacular. Bad start already. So we're proposing a masonry-based materiality.
Say that again.
A masonry-based materiality.
Right.
What is that? A brick. And in fact, one of the councillors said, "Do you mean a brick?" And he said, "Oh yeah, bricks."
Fuck's
and
sake.
I went back and talked to the guys in the office. I said, "Why would you do it? Literally, why would you do it?" I don't work for any architects. They're not never my clients.
Yeah,
so why would I speak like a complete arsehole, quite frankly, that no one understands?
Yeah.
It's very strange. It's very strange. And so when we set up the practice, and I've always done it, is we said we're going to speak normal, we're going to talk normal, we're going to think about the users a lot, and the users are not architectural professors or academics who write architectural books. The users are people, which is why we do so much affordable housing, of course.
Yeah.
And I think that there is still in architecture an insane amount of sort of belief that we're something that we're not anymore. This sort of old school, we're really important and we're sort of really professional, and yet we're not. We're part of a team, of a team and a system, and we have a very specific job to do. And those of us who do it well, it's a very good job to do. It's a great job to do, but we are just part of a team, And architects or architecture over the years, when I started 35 years ago, there was no such thing as a planning consultant. Planning consultants only ever did appeals, right? Not really any project managers even. Certainly never specialisms like spec writers or, all these sort of things. And we've steadily given that away because it's too boring for architects because we're all creative. Look at us.
Well, is it interesting, isn't it? Is it because it's too boring, or is it because all of the other stuff that you had to do, in terms of specialist reports, for example, is it just started getting too unwieldy and complicated?
And I think we'll talk a bit more about how the difference between what we did 30 years ago and now relative to the amount of information we have to produce, some of which I agree with, some I don't. But part of, in architecture school, when I did it in 96, there were all it was design. That was it. And at one level, I get that, because it's the only time in your life you're ever going to have the freedom just to do design. So I kind of get that at university there should be the freedom to explore some of those things. But it does then create a generation, and we're still doing it, although it's better than it used to be, the education system, of people coming out thinking that that's what it's all about. And 95% of my work is not design at all. In fact, quite a big proportion of it's talking now that I own my company and I present a lot.
Yeah.
But you know, this idea that, and I don't mind the fact that you did that in university, but I think that people need to be told. But when you get into the workplace, you know, a lot of it is that. So I don't, boring's maybe the wrong word, but I think it was just one of those where it was down the list of fun stuff to do. And so then as soon as someone pops up and says, well, I'll look after that for you. You know, don't worry, I'll do that. Oh yeah, brilliant, you do that, and then I can concentrate on doing my pretty pictures. You know,
Yeah.
And I've found so negative, and I kind of not wanting to be, because I think if you have the right attitude towards it, and you say to yourself, it is a privilege to do this. Someone in our office yesterday, he's only been working for about 3 years, never worked in architecture ever, and he's drawing a bin store. We're CADing up a bin store. And we say, he's only 22, and we say to him, you decide on the handle to open the bin store, sliding door, right? And for most people, that's whatever. But once we said to him, look, everyone who touches that, is because you've had an input in their life, however small that is. So it's a privilege to be able to do that. And I saw him, and he was on the text last night saying, you know, he's telling all his friends, I've designed this thing.
Oh, nice.
It's a bin store. And don't get me wrong, but I think if you try and create this culture of, and it comes back to this, we'll only draw what we can build, but we'll only draw what, you know, for reality. So we're drawing something, or we're designing something that is going to be a real thing rather than it being a paper exercise. And I think some of the architects that you refer to, it becomes a bit sort of self-fulfilling fabulousness of, look at this thing I can do.
Just a quick word to say thank you to our sponsors, Landtech, creators of Land Insight, which is the industry-leading bit of software to help developers find and analyse the potential of real 100% off-market development opportunities. I've been involved in the business for over 10 years now, and if you don't know what it basically does what people like me used to have to do the old-fashioned way, which is hunt around and get together all of the key information that's needed in order to make sensible decisions on the development potential of land. So that's planning data, market research, lists of all of the various constraints, environment and agency information, you name it, massive long list of all of the stuff that you need in order to find out who owns land, what policy constraints there might be, and exactly what you may or may not be able to do with it. All of the industry leading developers use it, and also the most clued up smaller ones. So if you're not already using it and you want to trial for yourself, have a look in the show notes. You'll find a link to get a free trial, test it for yourself, see what you think, and hopefully get busy finding real off-market development opportunities. So thanks again to our show sponsors, Landtech, and let's get back to the show. One of the things I quite often say to people is, if you see an architect in a bow tie, run away.
Do you know where it comes from, the bow tie?
Go on.
It comes from drawing boards. Your tie would get stuck under the parallel motion. And so that's why architects started wearing bow ties, because back in the 40s and 50s, whatever it was, everyone wore ties. But you couldn't wear a tie because it got stuck on the parallel motion. That's why we started wearing bow ties.
Very good, very good.
But yes, obviously with the invention of computers, you don't need to do that anymore.
Well, exactly. Well, I also say it's not architects with bow ties, it's also architects with cravats.
Oh yeah, cravat's a good one, yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
But then I say the same about developers with gilets.
Gilets?
You know, the sort of puff jacket, like sleeveless things. Yeah?
Are you getting developers wearing those?
Oh! I honestly can't believe that you don't see them. The West End posh crowd.
Oh, yeah, really?
Yeah.
Wow. They're the ones to avoid. Well, they sound like the ones to avoid. Well, look, absolutely. One of the reasons for starting doing this is to try to hopefully encourage people to be better developers, amongst other things, including, well, do you know what you might be talking about there is what I call lifestyle developers.
Yep.
You know, they don't really, and look, this is a generalisation, but it's worth talking about because we're just having a chat. You know, people that are just into, it's a bit sexy, isn't it? I'm a property developer.
I'm in property.
Yeah, I'm a developer, and I flash cars and all that sort of stuff. Lifestyle developers, they don't really, their main focus is perhaps just on the money. They don't really care about creating good stuff. Everything that's wrong really with developers, I think, or development. It should obviously, look, we do deserve to make a load of money. It is a super hard and risky business. There's got to be good money in it to make it worth our while. And even then, loads and loads of us disappear and go bust. That's particularly why there aren't many SME developers. But we do need more good ones.
Yes. I suppose the balance is always, we've got a couple of projects at the moment for temporary housing, actually, to try and it's a sector we really want to work in. And it's the balance between the cost and the quality. And the theoretically, good design doesn't cost extra money, totally agree. I'm not sure good design is the right word. Thoughtful design doesn't cost extra money, correct. But a green roof does cost more money than a plastic roof. There's no point in pretending it doesn't.
Yeah, absolutely.
And of course it's a better thing to do. But, one of the things that we found working in affordable housing, again, one of the things I think we get a bit frustrated with the planning system about, is this good ordinary idea where you say, okay, I can build 25 really nice, good homes for people, but they're not mega whizzy and they're not mega designy. They're just really good homes for people who want homes, and surely that's okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Surely it's all right to say, okay, we've built 25 homes and they're just really nice. More than that or less than that, rather than 20 that are, oh my God, I've won the Sterling Prize, look at me, aren't I fabulous architect, and all the rest of it.
Yeah, I agree. It's an interesting balance, isn't it?
And I'm not saying you don't need those ones because that's what pushes the envelope. But I think that if you start saying, and again, this is one of my problems with the planning system, that every development has to be that way, then you just start hemorrhaging money, literally for no reason. Well,
it's not just that. I tell you that the one of my main things. In fact, I started another business called Viability recently. I might tell you about that at some point. But I think one of the big issues in development generally is viability, and the fact that all the things we've got to provide now. And I'm not saying these are things that we shouldn't be providing. In an ideal world, I would be building 50% affordable housing everywhere, if not more. Right. Same as you. Like I grew up in the council house. So 50% affordable housing everywhere, probably more than 10% BNG, everything super sustainable, building with nature, which is something I'm particularly into. It's a really cool organisation you may or may not know called Building. So I'd be doing stuff like that all the time, given a choice. Problem is, I'm not really given a choice, and developers aren't, because we've still got to meet and beat existing use values, and stuff has got to be viable. And I think there's so many planners and policymakers don't realise that, and that by asking and trying to demand everything, they actually end up with nothing.
Yeah, totally agree. There's the story I like to tell is we did a theatre. We've done a few theatres, and the council insist on BREEAM Excellent, which philosophically I totally agree with. No problem at all. It's a really good idea to do BREEAM Excellent. But the only way to achieve it in this particular situation was to do a building management system with BMS, to run all the kit. So the capital cost of that was phenomenal. More importantly, to operate the system, you needed to go on these training courses, and the theatre operators couldn't afford to go on the training courses to operate the system. So they switched it off and bought a couple of radiators. I mean, it's bonkers. Everything about that's bonkers. And we'd said to the planning officers, okay, BREEAM Excellent, whilst we agree with it philosophically, it adds so much cost, both operationally and in running terms, for a theatre which really is always operating on the margins. Can we not just do very good? No, you've got to do excellent. And it's sort of just odd, isn't it? It's really...
Well, it is, and I think it's interesting. Who was a client on that?
So that was a developer client,
yeah,
where we were building a theatre for
got you.
a theatre group.
I think the big problem is, and this is one of the reasons I like trying to do things like this, is so that everyone in the sector can start actually seeing these other things. It's like, oh wow, I didn't realise like that asking for that was going to result in this. Because certainly when it comes from a developer's point of view, there are of course developers that are just bullshitters, but there are a load of us that are really good and that want to do the right thing. And I think part of the problem comes when planners and committees just think you're lying all the time.
Oh yeah, and I think unfortunately lots of developers historically have bullshitted, and that's created the problem. And I think, but it gets to the point where, and look, mate, we've been in this for a long time, and I say to anyone who's been to more than 3 committees will have a war story about a planning committee. But, where they say, well, Daylight Sunlight report said it's fine, but because the developer paid for it, we don't believe it.
Yeah.
What do you do with that? Because you're still older, an expert person's done it, and not only are you calling into question him or her and their sort of professional integrity, what do you do with that?
Yeah.
Pay for it, unless the council willing to pay for it themselves, which of course they can't because they haven't got any money and all the rest of it. So yes, there is I think that issue of the history, and some of them are worse than others. But I think the other thing is just the amount we have to do, the cost now of planning, and so therefore the risk associated with it. Again, when we started, and I know things have changed, and I'm not going to sit here like the grumpy old blokes out the Muppets saying back in the good old days and all that crap. But, it's one of these where I think over the years, someone has said, okay, I think that there's going to be interference with the TV aerials. Oh, there's a specialist who can do a report on that. Oh, better have one of them then.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, there's going to be, Sunlight Daylight's the obvious one, noises, blow out all of those. Oh, well, there's a bloke, the expert could do that. Oh, better have one of them. And before you know it, even the most basic plan application has 30 reports with it. All at 1,500 quid each, £2,000 each, and you just like, it's just bonkers. There was a guy I met, a developer who does housing, affordable housing only, up north somewhere, I'm not quite sure where. And he said he goes in to see the head of planning and the leader of the council and says to them, how many people are on your waiting list? And everyone's got huge amounts. And he says, right, I can build you 150 grand 3-bed houses, but your design officer's not allowed to get involved with my scheme. We'll do all the reports properly, but I want a grown-up to read them, and I don't want to go to planning committee unless you've told them to not be stupid about it. And that's how they've been delivering affordable housing. And isn't it sad that you have to do that? You have to say, I don't want a design officer because I know it's going to increase cost for possibly little return.
Yeah.
And
it's interesting you say that, because obviously, like me, you are not someone that's trying to squeeze through rubbish design.
No.
You do and want to do things the right way, as do I, as do many other developers. And, there is, I suppose it's difficult, isn't it? But, it is the bad ones make it bad for all of us, don't they? Because then I guess planners and committees and councils, everyone else feels like I guess they don't know who's good and who's not,
Exactly, and I think the thing that we probably don't understand, over the years I might have been to 25, 30 planning committees, but if you're on a planning committee, you're doing 10 a year. So if you've been on one for 5, you've done 50. So you've seen a hell of a lot more than we've seen, and you see the same thing time and time again, and you're going to start getting jaded about that, We were at a committee last night, which was an absolute, beyond level shit show. I'm not going to say where it is because I still need to work there. But, it was one where at one point someone said, well, I think the site should be used to grow wheat because then we don't have to rely on the Americans.
Well, look, let's talk about this actually, because this is one of the things we're trying to do here is help, particularly smaller house builders and developers, get more, get back in the market and grow, and get more good quality housing created, but also everyone else involved in the whole sector to understand how it all really works and what some of the problems are.
Yep.
Now, planning committees are the classic, or are part of the problem. So, we know what we're doing, we do everything all right. You spend fortunes on trying to keep everyone happy and submitting all the various reports. You may well get yourself to the point whereby you've got a recommendation for approval. So you've satisfied the professionals, the planners, and then you end up at a planning committee. And most planning committees, they're of variable quality, let's just say, and hardly any of them have hardly any training. And then you get some real weird stuff happening. So tell me, so you had one last night, yeah?
Yeah, so that was...
Tell me roughly, you might not have to...
It's still live, this project.
Name the guilty, but give us some clues.
It was outside London, so it was a regional, and it was a housing scheme. It was outline application. And it was in an area that is
How many homes?
650.
650, wow, so it's a big one.
Yeah, and it's in absolute dire need of affordable housing in this area.
Yeah.
Of which 40% of it was going to be affordable. And in fact, the developer had committed to do the affordables phase 1.
So just for anyone that might not be getting what we're talking about here, so out of 650 units, 40% of them were going to be affordable housing.
We don't say units either.
Homes, sorry.
Yeah, so this is another thing, right? This is another thing that...
is that banned in your office?
Yeah, no, so your homes, dwellings, flats, whatever, right? Units is what developers say for investments.
Right? It is
right, and so it's a very strict rule in ours.
Yeah, no, it's fair enough. And I must admit, I do.
I haven't just said it.
I do try not to say it most of the time because you're right. But this is interesting, right? Yes, of course they are homes, and we want to create homes, and we need to build homes. But actually, in terms of units, there are financial elements to this. I'm afraid there just are.
And one argument in our office is, whilst it's theoretical, then you can call it a unit. Yeah. But I don't agree. It's homes.
No, I know what you mean. Look, it is theoretical.
Anyway, whatever.
That's why I'm calling it a unit.
650 homes,
yes.
right?
40% of which
are going to be
affordable and importantly going to be provided up front.
Yes.
So they're the first things that get provided. Yep. And just like everywhere in the country, there's going to be massive housing need for those. Yep. No doubt, loads of people in temporary accommodation and things like that.
So in this particular area, and just this small area, there's 900 people on the waiting list, and there's 300 people in temporary housing.
Exactly. So all those people need good quality, proper homes as soon as possible.
Yeah. And it was a strange committee, and it's an area where there's no significant overall political control. So a lot of it is infighting between local councillors, and a lot of it is about historically, it's the classic, you have no authority here, Jackie Weaver kind of situation. Last night it was one of those ones.
And again, if anyone doesn't know what that's about,
so
just go on YouTube
from COVID, right?
and put that in. Jackie Weaver, isn't it?
It got deferred, and it got deferred because they wanted additional information. So, but the additional information is not information we can even provide. It's of the county level, and we're sort of just stuck in the middle. And all the while, people are, not being housed.
Yeah.
Having said that, and this is where, and I do feel like we're being a bit old and grumpy here, mate. And I think let's talk about solutions a little bit. I went to a planning committee the week before, and I will say it was Hounslow Council, and there were a huge amount of objectors, and it was for 56 flats, of which 35% affordable, so normal policy stuff, yeah? And it was a brilliant committee, a proper grown-up committee, that the councillors had all read the papers properly, they'd all read the reports properly, that they asked questions that were genuine to find out information, not for grandstanding. And they asked it of the objectors as well as of us and of the specialists. And they then had a genuine debate, and they then said, whilst we're sympathetic to the objections, this meets the requirements of our local plan, which is what we should all be assessing against, and therefore we're going to give it planning permission. And it was great. It really showed the system does work if you spend the time and be mature about it. And we were talking afterwards, and we were talking months ago about plan system, and Angela Rayner's going to do this and this, that, and the other. And one of the things we were saying was about training for planning committee members.
I was going to talk. I'm glad you mentioned that. I was going to talk to you about that.
So for another one, for instance, we did a scheme, and again, in Kingston, and they have a pre-briefing where there were new councillors on the planning committee, never done it before. And so we went in, and it was major projects, and we went in and we did a presentation, and the councillors could ask all sorts of questions which, are a bit odd, but without the public there, they almost like it could be a bit more of a genuine conversation, or a bit of a grown-up conversation, because they weren't sort of conscious of grandstanding.
And they obviously they didn't have to worry about looking stupid.
Exactly. And so it was this where they could just say, okay, exactly that, what do you mean by shared ownership? What do you mean by social rent or a London living rent or whatever else it may be? Yeah. And it could be a genuine conversation. And so it meant when we got to the committee, it was a really good debate, but it was a grown-up debate. It was a sort of thoughtful, insightful debate about this will have an impact on this, but is that okay because of what it's going to give us in return? And we had the same with the housing one, where it was great. It was a very we understand this is going to change something, but actually the affordable housing is worth it, or the quality is worth it, or the new public realm that we're providing is worth it. So it was really good. So the training, I think, is a great idea, and whether or not there can be some sort of Ofsted equivalent for planning committees where people go along, and see how they operate, and then say, okay, you guys need a bit more training, because I don't think it's fairly simple, right? In reality, the council have a local plan with a bunch of policies in it. We as architects and developers and everyone else say, the policy says that if I've done it, surely you have to say yes. And a good committee is one that says our policy that we've all signed up to says that they can do this thing, and therefore we have to say yes to it. I think the difficulty is when people say, and again, we've all got the stories, but where they say, well, I don't agree with the policy anyway. I never voted for the policy. I'm like, okay, how does that help us? Whether you did or not, it's still with your policy, So I think that training, and possibly, this sort of, some sort of inspector kind of thing. Yeah, where you go special measures almost. And I think if the Labour Party really want to deliver all these houses, they're going to have to start doing things like this.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think training is an important thing, and it's one of the things I will, as you know, I've got a bit of a property development training business. One of the things I've been thinking about
doing... Do you, throughout this entire thing, just name check all of your businesses?
Have I mentioned that? I don't think I mentioned that one, have I?
Yeah, but you mentioned the other viability one earlier.
It's called Millbank Land Academy, one, by the way, just so you know.
Website is?
Mate, I'm trying to get more developers
it's good.
Building good stuff.
It's good.
So, and planners and people understanding stuff. What I was going to say, and this is for free, I'm not even going to try to sell this, I want to do something for planning committees.
But will they believe you, right? So again, this one last night...
Well, I'll do it with you, won't I?
No, but this one last night, right, someone said, and I'd never come across it, they said, we had that briefing about affordable housing, and they said, but it turned into a lobbying session about how we have to build houses. And it's like, well, if you're going into it with that attitude, then there's literally nothing we can do for you. However, having said that, there are probably lots of councillors who would really appreciate it, because it's not... we're not trying to, they're there to make a decision, and that's great, and we respect their decision-making process, but please make it based upon the information you've already put out there for us to follow, And I just find it really strange that when people start saying, well, I know it meets the policy, but I still don't agree with it. And it's like, well, okay, personally that's fine, but if you are on a planning committee, it is your job to assess it relative to your own policies, training, let's do that.
Because I'll tell you what, there's even in
terms of Hughes, brothers from another mother, planning committee training session.
Exactly. Seriously, because I'll tell you, one of the things I think they don't understand is just at its simplest, how land is valued.
Yep.
For the fact that, look, you know, if we can't meet such and such land value, the landowner isn't going to sell. The thing's going to stay as it is. You're not going to get any housing. We're not, you know, and that is really the issue.
Yeah.
And I think everyone thinks it's greedy developers. Actually, no, I don't want to be saying greedy landowners, because obviously I need to do deals with landowners and I don't want to be them not liking me. But the fact of the matter is, you know, for most landowners, unless it's a public sector, and it's interesting actually, we can come on to that, you know, their bit of land, their asset is probably the most valuable thing they're ever going to own.
Yep.
Yeah, they might have inherited it, it might have been a old factory or something that's been in a business that they built for years. You know, obviously they are not going to, you know, they want as much as they can for it. Most things, everything's got an existing use value. It's worth what it is as it is. People need to be incentivised over and above that to sell. That is the bar, that is the barrier that we've as developers got to meet and beat before we can even start. And I don't think a lot of planners understand that at all, and they realise the reason they can't just keep, well, why aren't you doing this? Why isn't it 50% affordable housing, etc., etc.? The whole development viability and land value thing is such a fundamental thing that I think a lot of people, particularly even committees, just don't get.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, and also the knock-on costs of throwaway comments by planning officers, by planning committees, by landowners, by anyone else. You know, and it's sort of death by a thousand cuts, because it's sort of like, well, okay, you've only got 4 EV charging points, which is policy compliant, I hasten to add, as an example, but we'd quite like 10. Okay, individually they're not that big of money, but then you add that to, oh, well, you know, we know you're using medium quality bricks, but we want high quality bricks, and we want this sort of triple glazing, and we want, you know, before you know it,
yeah, absolutely,
it all adds up. And if you're running a scheme where it is, you know, marginal, or at least bang on viability terms, it all then triggers into it being a problem.
And just so councillors and planners and stuff understand what that all means, and bear in mind, I don't want to bang on too much about how I do and want to do create good quality stuff, but you know, let's just take the last couple of years. Over the last 3 years, build costs have probably gone up 40%.
Absolutely.
40,
yeah.
right? Interest rates have gone from you know, less than 1% to whatever they are now. Yeah, massive. Just that alone what wipes developers out.
Yeah, totally.
You know, before you've even started. So yeah, that's just big risk stuff that can and does happen anyway. Couple that with a flat market, or maybe even a market that goes down, or who knows, a Brexit, a global financial crisis, a COVID, who knows, you know, a shock in between. And that's why there are so few small developers who we really, really need back. Mm-hmm. So I really want planners and committee members and people to understand that, is because, you know, honestly, so many deals are only just viable anyway that just you know, what basically happens is the small developers, their margin gets squeezed, and it ends up to the point whereby, you know, they're either going to make no money, so they give up because it's just not worth their while, or in actual fact, worse than that, they'll actually go bankrupt and disappeared. And then what happens, as has happened, we have not got enough people to build all the homes we need.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and then that ties into, or that leads on to, everybody saying, well, the big house builders are a monopoly and they're manipulating the market and blah, 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 and they're land banking and all the rest of it. It's like, well, okay, if you don't want them to be only the big players, then help us out from an SME point of view, and we can get a little bit of, you know, mix going on, because we need all of these different people delivering, don't we? Particularly if we're going to start meeting those targets, you know. Yeah. Very good.
So, interestingly, so just jumping back to the whole affordable thing. So that must have been a bit of a pivot then, because are you all affordable housing now?
About 95%.
Okay.
Yeah. We do some private developments, but it's not an area that we push. It's not an area that we, know that, and we don't know the people in that market very well. We know a lot of affordable housing, and about 70% of or 60% of our practice is technical now. So just post planning work.
But that's on your own schemes or for other people as well?
And for other people as well.
Oh,
so
right,
we work
interesting.
direct with contractors a lot now.
So that's another one. Again, just a little bit, because I'm trying to get some learning stuff in here for people as well. So one of the things that lots of people, but in particular developers, smaller ones, don't realise is that so you get architects that are really good at planning, you get architects that are really good on production and delivery. I don't actually think you usually get that much overlap in my experience, unless it's some massive practice and they've got it all in-house, then they tend to be much more expensive that we can't afford.
Yeah.
So people really need to know, it tends to, so for me, it's horses for courses. I might use someone's really good on planning, but I wouldn't use them on working drawings, for example.
And the same with location or building type. So, we're sitting in one of your developments in the countryside. We wouldn't do that sort of work. We don't really know enough. It's not our thing. So architects, it's worth talking to them about what their specialism is or what their expertise is, because yes, you're right. Lots of people say, "Oh, you're an architect, therefore you must do all this stuff." I've never done domestic work. I've never done a person's extension, for instance, ever.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even know where to start with it, quite frankly.
Yeah.
So yes, there is that. It's about talking to people about what they're good at and what their
and a bit of a warning to newer people as well is lots of consultants, whatever they are, architect, planners, whatever, they'll tell you that they can do it and they're good at everything because, of course, they want the work.
Absolutely.
Or maybe that sometimes they even think they're good at it and they're not. So
absolutely, yeah. I mean, or it's a market they want to try to get into.
Yes.
But again, just be open about it,
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Yeah.
Tell you something I think you're into that we haven't really spoken about is off-site and modern methods of construction and stuff like that.
Yep.
You are.
Yeah. So we've worked with most of them, unconnected to us. Most of them have gone bankrupt. We're
glad you got that in before I did.
We're working with a brilliant company called Boutique Modern, developing
I like them. Yeah.
Developing a temporary housing. Or transitional housing, emergency housing, whatever you want to call it, product called Modern Home, which we're working up with them at the moment.
That's with Boutique Modern, yeah?
And we're pushing it really hard because it is a fabulous model to try. It's basically temporary planning on council sites for temporary housing. Because it's modular, we can take it away, but it's a very quick fix. And I was talking to someone at a conference, and they were saying, "Yeah, but it's not a permanent solution." So, yeah, but it doesn't. At the moment, if you have 5 sites, you do 4 of them like this. The 5th site, you then do permanent housing, and then you sort of move them across.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you've got people out of travel lodges and crappy B&Bs.
I was going to say, well, but people in a bread and breakfast not a permanent solution, is it?
So it's really good now, and the modular is an interesting one when we talk about risk and land and viability and planning and all of that sort of stuff. One of the reasons I think that they fail so often is, and having now worked in with most of them, the most important thing to them is, from a production point of view, is to keep the line going. And so the only way to keep the line going is to have certainty of order.
Yeah.
And so if you're in a small builder and your job starts getting delayed for planning or whatever, you can go and jump onto another job, hopefully. But if your line in the factory stops because the order's fallen through because of external factors, planning or whatever else it may be, it costs you a stunning amount of money, and you will very quickly go under. And so one of the things that they're grappling with, but I think we as an industry are grappling with moving into this, is a change of mindset from the old way of working of get planning, go out to tender, get the most competitive quote, chat about it for a while, eventually go and build, to more of a framework of being able to say to these modular providers, particularly councils, we guarantee you 1,000 houses over the next 5 years. We don't know where they're going to be, and we don't know what they're going to look like, and we haven't got planning for them yet, but we guarantee it, which means that you can then fund your business whilst we sort out the detail. But it's such a fundamental shift to the way we've always delivered housing. That's what's proving very difficult. But I think it has to be something like that in order to unlock it, because I really feel for them, they've got these huge factories. They spent all this money, and the line is going, and then all of a sudden, as I say, some committee fella says, "Well, I think it should be a wheat farm.
Yeah.
Let's defer the scheme."
Yeah.
And it's like, hold up a second, I've got 300 houses I thought I was going to be building, and suddenly got 0.
I know.
So it's fascinating. It's really fascinating.
I feel like I can't tell you now about my new business viability that's been designed to solve that problem.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah. No, I'll tell you about it. Seriously, I wasn't planning. I've obviously not seen you for a while.
Yeah, we have talked about it a little bit.
Oh, have we?
Yeah.
The viability thing.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, but if you want to talk about it.
Well, no, I do want to talk about it because it is a problem that needs to be solved.
Yeah,
right.
It does.
So obviously, modern methods of construction, modular, whatever, it's horses for courses, right?
Yeah.
It isn't right for all sites, as we know. And particularly for smaller developers, where historically, most of the stuff I've done, well, not obviously, in my sort of, big house builder days and things like that, they were, monster schemes. Smaller developers tend not to be able to do that stuff. And for me, particularly, it's been off-market, tight little sites, land assemblies, hopefully clever stuff that gives me a little bit of an edge, because everyone else can't do it or they're not after it. And those type of sites, almost by definition, have to be super bespoke.
Yeah, for sure.
You've got an overlooking distance or an angle to the way to maximise what you can get on there. It's got to be clever stuff, really.
Yeah.
So it's almost at the opposite end of the scale to stick in a rectangular box on there.
Yeah.
So, but of course there are. So everything is horses for courses. Now, for me personally, I think like Cat 2 and panelised systems and things like that are much more. I'm going to say much more the way forward. They're definitely more versatile and you can use in more different situations than just Cat 1 modular, right? That's what I think. I mean, what's your view on that?
Yeah, great. So we've done multiple projects which are infill where we've done Cat 2 for this very reason. So we did a whole series of sites at Greenwich Council where like their old garage sites or infill sites where their philosophy is modular, full stop. And then you look at it and so you can't get the truck in or it doesn't suit it.
Exactly.
So therefore we say, well, okay, we're going to go to category 2, which is panelised. So we've been doing that with SIPs. And that's been great because it's still quicker, it's still more efficient, it's still all the other stuff, but you can get into tricky little sites. But then there's other ones where you say, well, actually this suits, a big field somewhere that's flat, suits modules. And that's fine. So yes, it is a small component in the big puzzle of how we solve some of this stuff. But as I say, unless we start thinking about us purchasing a product rather than building a thing, the system simply doesn't lend itself to it. It doesn't. The way we set up procurement doesn't lend itself to modular, and that is a major problem.
I agree, and I think most people probably know that. It's the reason most of the big ones have gone down the pan. Really, is the planning difficulties that we have to deal with means they've got no clear or certain pipeline. Absolutely. And all of a sudden, something you thought was going to get planning didn't, and next thing you know, you've got a factory sitting there idle.
Absolutely.
So one of the things, my new thing is trying to do is actually solve that problem for the suppliers, okay? And now, but from a developer's point of view, for the smaller guys and girls, let's just say, one of the reasons we do, I mean, look, where we are now, this isn't trad, right? It couldn't be more non-traditional, right? But given the choice, most people are still brick and block.
Absolutely. And
timber, but just because they know it's more widely available. It can sort of fit anything. It can be bespoke. It can be whatever. But not only that, for smaller developers and all developers, I think actually, finding and costing and assessing all of the different alternatives is not necessarily that easy.
Yep.
So one of the things we're trying to do is create a little bit of a platform where we match them up, and they can see right at the design stage. Oh look, I could fit the XYZ modular box on here and it would work really well. And I know, you know, so I design it in, and that's what I get planning for. Because of course, one of the other things that happens is people go away, get planning, they then start thinking about off-site stuff and find out, it doesn't work because we've designed it the wrong way.
Yeah. But again, and I think the bit that I came to realise, I can't remember what project it was on, but anyway, it was the other thing with traditional is there's hundreds of people who can do it.
Yes.
So if that guy doesn't work, there's someone else. That girl, the woman doesn't work, there's someone else. So the risk is a lot less.
Yeah.
And so this is not just a risk from a financial or a time point of view. It's also from a knowledge point of view. You know,
Totally.
I've got my mate down the pub who can build this for me, and if he can't do it, my other mate from the other pub can do it. And so, I kind of get it from that point of view. But again, we're not. And that there will always be a place for that, and that's okay. But the upsides of doing MMC or modular or panelised or any of the rest of them are so great that it's really worth us trying to find some solutions for this stuff, you know. Yeah. And I think stuff like that where it just all comes back to that certainty, I suppose, doesn't it? You know. And again, it's you start spending your money trying to get planning for a super whizzy system. You know, you've sort of got in bed with it and you've taken all that risk. Whereas if you try and get planning for something that's brick and block, that's just something we need to also balance. It all comes back to that certainty idea as well, doesn't it? I think.
Absolutely. So I mean, we talked about a lot of different things there. We could. I'm sure we could go on.
Yeah, the modular we talk about for days, quite frankly.
We could. So what if you had to sort of come up with? Well, I won't give you a number. I was going to say top 3, but
sum.
The top sum. Give me the top sum things that to solve the housing crisis. What's some of the stuff that needs to happen?
Not a word.
What would you think?
I think the planning passports I've already said are really good.
Well, interesting.
Do you not?
Well, go on. Tell me.
Okay. Well, I don't know. I've not read enough, but certainly the conversations. Again, we've been talking about this for a couple of years, in fact. I saw Angela Rayner do a talk at the, I can't never remember the name of it, but the Leeds conference, the housing conference, that if a scheme is policy compliant, it should automatically go through. It shouldn't even go to committee. They've written the policies, you've met the policies, what is there to discuss? So if that's the way the system works, I think that's great. Whether it works that way, I don't know. I don't know enough about it, but I think that theory is really good. Solving the housing crisis. Okay, I think the training for planning committees is a good idea. I think that would help ease things. I think having the housing targets reintroduced is a good thing.
Agreed, yeah.
Totally a good thing. I think having some way of either a bit like you do with mayors in London or Manchester or the rest of it, where there is a more of a regional body that can say, whilst we understand the local issues, there is a pressing need here, and therefore we're going to overrule your refusal and make this happen. And it's a bit, I suppose, there is that of, everyone keeps saying there's a housing crisis, but no one's then saying, let's have a crisis response. They're saying, oh, let's tinker here or tinker there. If you're going to use the word housing crisis, let's say it's a crisis and do something about it. Now, you know, we all saw what happened in COVID, that great, things can be done very quickly if you want them to, from a government and a local point of view. However, there is a risk associated with a bunch of people coming in and, you know, screwing over the system and stealing loads of money. So, you know, you're trying to balance those things. But if it is a crisis, let's say it is a crisis, we're going to make it happen. And therefore that means we're going to have, some people are going to get upset about that, and it's not going to work for some people, you know. And that's not about ignoring quality or ignoring rules or not doing good stuff, but it is about saying at the end of the day, it comes back to this good ordinary point, delivering 300 quite nice, affordable homes should be an absolute no-brainer, shouldn't it?
Yeah.
You know? But these things get delayed.
They do. And so look, I agree with most of those points. What do you think's what's the biggest risk that might stop all that stuff happening?
Bureaucracy, committees, talking, the endless fear of doing something, so you talk about it rather than doing it. Without going super negative, there's a project we're looking at with a council where they have been talking about it in committees for 2 years, and this is for temporary housing. So this is a time-critical issue.
Yeah.
This is not at some point in the future we'd quite like a swimming pool. This is a time-critical issue. £94 million a month the London boroughs spend on temporary housing. There's this particular council is £84,000 a week they spend on temporary housing, and yet they've been talking about it in committees for 2 years, because years and years ago I worked with someone and they said to me, "Are you working to do it right, or are you working to not do it wrong?" And committees and the bureaucracy tends to be, "Oh, we're going to do it so it's not wrong." And so there's always this, "Oh, I better not do that, I better not do that." Fine. Some of them are going to be shit, and we're all going to go, we'll look at what happened post-war. Post-war, going to build all these fabulous utopian ideal, and they're all fucking awful. So we've got to be careful, I get that. But at the same time, doing nothing is not going to get us anywhere, is it? Yeah. So bureaucracy and endless talking. But again, it's easy for us. We own our own businesses. We're in the private sector. Most of my work's in the public sector, so I know a bit about it. But we're more entrepreneurial. We're used to doing these things. But this fear factor of doing anything seems to just grind everything to a halt, basically. We've got this particular council we've got on. There's 8 bungalows surrounded by 2-storey terrace stuff. So we can, and they're currently, in fact, they're studios. They're that small, like 1-bed studio bungalows, surrounded by 2-bed terrace stuff. Social rent housing, an older population in them, so they're going to be moving out anyway. And we can replace that with 22 houses for families. Yeah. It's an absolute no-brainer, right? Planning risk is 0. The people living in them are moving out anyway. They're really old. They need repair. You spend loads of money on repairing them. And we've been talking about it for 6 months. And it's just, I don't know what's stopping you just saying yes. Yeah. Why wouldn't you just say yes? Get on with it. Anyway, bureaucracy, I think, is going to kill us all. Bit heavy to end on there, really. Yeah,
I'm trying to think how
what you should have done was start with what's the problem
around,
and then what's the positive. However, having said that, like this housing committee, the system can work if everyone's grown up about it. There are really good people trying to do stuff. I think the mere fact that there's lots of talk about we need to do it is a good start. So it's almost 10 years ago, objecting was seen as that was great. Oh, I'm an objector, look at me. Whereas now I think there is a little bit of embarrassment about, even though I'm objecting and I secretly am a NIMBY, the good thing is it has become a negative word, and it has become, yes, I understand that there is massive housing need for people, it's just, we need to just get that unlocked and get that thing going, and
Yeah, so let's finish up then. So, and we can all agree there is a massive housing need. Yeah. We all want to help get more good quality housing created. People do need to get on with it and make some decisions. And importantly, in all of this, this is the main reason for doing this, that the sooner we can all start collaborating and working together, it's interesting actually. You mentioned that whole thing about architects right at the very beginning. See what I've done here. I've just looped it back right to the very beginning.
It's like you're a professional.
A bit like I'm a professional. With what you said, it really is like teamwork and collaboration, and no one person, including developers, particularly developers, can do it on their own, and we've all got to work together.
Yeah, and I think there's it's about trust. It's, look, in every industry there's some arseholes, and in every industry there's some really good people. Yeah. But most people are all right, and I think if we all just went in the room and said, okay, not all planning committee members are idiots. In fact, a lot of them are really good. Planning officers, a lot of them are really good. Developers, a lot of them are really good. Architects, a lot of them are really good. And if we all go in the room saying, okay, we're not trying to screw each other over here, we're just trying to work together, and there's a sort of trust there, I think that would be a really good start, wouldn't it?
It would, and that is an excellent place to leave it. I totally agree.
Don't forget to do your remember to subscribe thing.
But remember, thanks for coming, viewing, listening, whatever you're doing. But importantly, because I always forget to say this, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, tell your friends about it if you like it. If you don't like it, don't tell anyone. And we'll see you on the next one. So subscribe. Thanks for tuning in to Inside Property Development. Please remember to like and subscribe. Do join us every week where we'll be speaking to house builders, developers, experts, planners and everyone involved in trying to get more much needed housing created the right way. We'll learn together how we can collaborate rather than fight, and by working together we can all help create better places, spaces and homes and a much more beautiful world.